Well, fortunately for you, I was just getting started. Anyway, over the years, I've lost many, many things in life. My keys, my phone, my car a couple times, my mind, my patience, you name it, I've lost it. But tonight's story that I bring you is not my own. It is borrowed from my dear husband, Larry. Now, Larry could not be here tonight, or perhaps he chose not to be here tonight, knowing that I'm about to tell you what has over the years become known as the infamous thermometer story. Okay, travel with me in time, back in time, if you will, to the early 1980s. The year is 1983, and Larry's a 20-year-old young man who grew up working in his grandparents' restaurant. He graduated high school, he had some college under his belt, but he was having a really hard time deciding on a career path. Now, his then roommate was trying to get on with the fire department, and after talking with him a bit about it, Larry thought that sounded like a good idea. So Larry enrolled in fire science classes at our local community college. And part of that curriculum was that he had to accrue experience hours working at a hospital emergency room. So this is how he found himself at Eden Hospital in Castro Valley, shadowing one of the ER nurses who was less than thrilled to have this 20-year-old guy following her around like a puppy dog on her shift. For purposes of our story, we will call her Nurse Ratchet. Now, the first patient that Larry encountered to the ER was a sick little baby that had been brought in by its worried parents. Now, Nurse Ratchet threw poor Larry right into the deep end. Instead of doing it herself, she directed him to take the baby's vital signs while she observed. So Larry did as he was told, learning on the job, took the vital signs, got some history from the parents, and then came time to take the baby's temperature. Now, two things to keep in mind. Remember, this is 1983. This was before, well, it was actually the era between those glass mercury thermometers that we had as a kid and today's infrared point-and-shoot thermometers. Second, Larry is an only child and he has no cousins. He comes from a very small family. So he's had very little experience around babies, and he probably would have been more comfortable handling a live grenade than taking a baby's temperature. So Nurse Ratchet retrieves the device and hands it to Larry, and it is the thermometer that was in use at that time. It was an electronic thermometer. What it looked like was a red plastic box that had digital reading on it. It had a curly cord coming out of it, and at the end of that cord was a wand. Now, Nurse Ratchet instructed Larry to obtain a disposable plastic sheath and put it on the end of the wand, lube it up, and insert it into the baby's rectum. Now, Larry was dying inside, but he really wanted to get on with the fire department, so he did as he was told, while Nurse Ratchet hovered and the baby's parents watched anxiously. After what seemed like an eternity, that little red box beeped, signaling that the baby's temperature had been recorded. So Larry removed the wand, noted the temperature, breathed a sigh of relief, and was just glad that that part of his ordeal was over. So it was quiet in the emergency room for a little while after that, until a patient was brought in with very severe injuries from a motorcycle accident. So while most of the medical staff was occupied dealing with that situation, other patients started arriving and needed to be triaged. Nurse Ratchet, apparently confident in her training of Larry, dispatched him to assess one of the new arrivals by himself. So Larry gets to the exam room and he finds a big burly biker guy waiting there for him. And this man is in pitiful shape. He's come to the ER because he's having horrible abdominal pain. This is a big guy. He's like literally the poster boy for the Hell's Angels, or at least Satan's little helpers. Big guy, big old belly, stringy hair, long hair, bushy beard, tats, leathers, the works. But he was sitting on the exam table with that crinkly paper underneath him, rocking and moaning and pleading for relief. He was in bad shape. So Larry dutifully goes about taking the assessment as he's been trained. He takes the patient's history, he notes his symptoms and their onset, he takes his pulse, he takes his blood pressure, and then it comes time to take his temperature. For purposes of tonight's example, we will call this gentleman Chopper. So Larry retrieves the red plastic box, he obtains a disposable sheath, puts it on, lubes it up, and turns and tells Chopper, "You need to drop your pants so I can take your temperature." Chopper had a look of horror on his face, but he was in such pain, he's moaning, "No, really?" But Larry assured him, "This is protocol. In the emergency room, it's customary to take a rectal temperature because it's the most accurate reading, and that's how they do it here." So Chopper was in no condition to argue. He flopped onto his side like a baby walrus, managed to wriggle down his pants far enough so that Larry could do his business. And I believe it looked a little something like this. Finally, the box mercifully beeped, signaling that Chopper's temperature had been recorded. Larry pulls out the wand, turns to record the temperature in his notes, and then realizes that he's lost something.
Oh no!
The sheath is not on the end of the wand, which could mean only one thing. It was still in Chopper's hairy ass. So again, Larry was dying inside, but he handled it like a champ, and he ran back into that burning building, and he retrieved that sheath, which was just barely peeking out from Chopper's chocolate starfish. Now afterwards, neither of them said very much. Larry turned away, both to hide his shame and to finish taking his notes. And then he left the room and scurried off to the men's room to hide. Now, a short time later, he was back out on the floor, and here comes Nurse Ratched, and she's got a look on her face. And she, stifling a laugh, informs Larry that they take adult's temperature orally by using the blue box that has a different kind of wand attached to it. And as the night wore on in that ER, it became abundantly clear to Larry that not only had Chopper complained about his ordeal, word had spread through all the ER staff about what Larry had done to him. And that is why, many years later, my dear darling Larry retired after 30 years with PG&E, while his former roommate went on to retire as chief of the Alameda Fire Department.